We all want to be happier, but how do we get there? First, we start by realizing happiness is not a destination. Being happy consists of micro action steps every single day. I'm your host, Brittany King, and I'm here to guide you along the way. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Positively Real podcast. I'm your host and your coach, Brittany King, and I got a fun episode for you today. I have Erin Panzarella with me, and I get to talk to her about all things healing, subconscious beliefs, childhood trauma, all my favorite things that I've just been diving into in my own life. And Erin is a trauma-informed spiritual mentor, and her methodology is really, it's like this well-rounded approach to mind, body, and spirit, like just based off of everything that I've learned about you. And all of the practices use her intuition to create a custom experience that helps facilitate change within her client's life. So I am stoked to have this conversation because these are my favorite types of conversations to have. So Erin, welcome to the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for that beautiful. I feel like that was a really great way to describe my work in the world. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you do with like the breath work, Kundalini, like you literally have approached mind, body, spirit, which I think is what really does help facilitate the transformation. And I love that you're also trauma informed. And I think getting into this work, really it's really important to understand trauma, even if you don't intend to work with people that have can classify their trauma. Everybody has some sort of trauma that they've experienced in their life, whether it's big T or little t. So I love that your approach is also trauma informed. So let's dive in. Give a little background about what you do, what you're up to in the world, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you so much. So what I do, I mean, you explained it really perfectly, but I really like to bridge the gap between the spiritual realm and the human one. So I use a lot of tools to help us realize the spiritual moments in the everyday life and how we can really use our body, mind, and spirit as a tool to help us unlock more joy, less suffering, and really navigate in a way that is filling us up. And based on what you actually want rather than the conditioning of the world that told you you should do something else. And my way towards this path, I think there's a very long-winded story there, but I got into this work around 15 years ago. So right in my freshman year of college was when I started to really dive in because I had a really hard experience in my freshman year of college. My mom was a Reiki master and teacher throughout my whole life. So I had some glimpses into energy work, but I was very resistant to it because my mom was doing it. So I thought it was very strange, but I would be open to it when I was in pain. So she would do some Reiki on me when I, had my period and was really hurting or something like that. But otherwise, I was pretty closed off to it. So I had an influence, but it really came at a point where I had such a horrible first year. I had a lot of trauma that I finally was like, okay, I need to start navigating in a very different way, or else I don't know what's going to happen to me. So my work began. I saw my first spiritual mentor that year, and I became even more open. And then I just started to dive into every possible resource I could find on mind, body, and spirit. So I I feel like back then it was more like books and like kind of weird meetings you would go to with everyone in the room was like 30 to 40 years older than I was. But I really started to find community and find people who were living a happy life. And that was not something I had seen growing up. I felt like everyone was miserable. They just kept working and trying to survive. And when I went into these meetings, I was like, wait a minute, survival isn't the only thing. Like we can actually cultivate peace. We can actually cultivate happiness and joy in the moment, which was mind-blowing to me because my whole life I had lived a path of suffering. I had a very significant loss. My dad died 11 days before my 5th birthday, and that grief ran the show. I'm also adopted, so there's a lot of abandonment wounding in that. And then top it all off, I couldn't remember basically most of my childhood. So I kind of was blocked off, just feeling so consumed by a lot of negativity, a lot of things I had never looked at within myself. So to finally have access to tools that could change that for me was completely revolutionary.
Wow. So like having those big life experiences, it's so fascinating, like how two people, because I don't remember a lot from my childhood. Um, I also have deep wounds of abandonment and fear of rejection. And it's so fascinating to have like such different like circumstances of life, but to have what's happening inside of us be so similar.
Oh my goodness. And I see that more and more, that we're all going through such similar things. We
Hmm.
all have also a very unique path and unique tools that help us in different ways, but I just know the interconnectedness between each human is so much more vast than we like give credit for. I think that a lot of times we think we're fully alone in what we're experiencing, and just diving into this work, diving into community, I'm like, oh my God, we're not alone at all.
No. And it's like, it's so much, it's like so important to understand that. Like one of the things that I talk to with my clients a lot is the shared humanity. Is like when you're going through something, it's like validating what you're experiencing, but then also normalizing it. Like there are other human beings that have felt this way, and it really like takes away that isolation and loneliness, which
Yeah,
just sounds like it's what you found when you kind of dove into this work.
1,000%. Yeah, I think I had spent my whole life feeling lonely. I had felt like I was an outsider through my whole experience because I had experienced a lot of things that other people hadn't. So to finally meet people and hear their story and find out, oh my God, I'm not alone. I think that more than anything was probably like the biggest connecting factor and like biggest catalyst for healing in my journey.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, so let's dive in. One of the things that really stood out to me is this, like, why you don't need to know everything in order to heal and transform.
Mhm.
Um, because I find that sometimes I get stuck in this cycle of being like this chronic, just always, I don't want to say fixer because that used to be my past. I used to always try to fix things, but just like never feeling like I am completely satisfied with where I'm at in my healing journey. Like always wanting that there needs to be more. I need to learn more. I need to dive into this and like go to like the deep depths of myself. Why isn't that true?
Oh my goodness. I love that you're bringing this up right now, because that has been one of the biggest realizations for me, is that we don't have to be constantly healing. Like every single thing in our life, we don't have to be constantly healing. I think that we can actually tend towards obsession with healing to the point where we take ourselves out of the beauty of being human.
Mm-hmm.
And I found just along this journey that really the most impactful learning is experiential. So
Mm-hmm.
we can really try and analyze everything with the logical mind. We can try and find the pinpoint in the past that was like, this is the moment that everything changed for me, and unravel it. But I find that really what healing, like the biggest healing for me, has been healing the belief systems in real time by taking different action. That's really, I don't even know how to word it. I want to say like kind of counteracting the limiting belief that I have. So really being able to take different action than I did before. And I find that that has such a deep rooted healing beyond anything that I can logically come up with in the mind. So kind of going down the path of why you don't have to remember everything. I didn't remember anything about my childhood or my trauma when I started this healing work. So I basically, me and my friends actually used to joke that it's like someone took an eraser to my brain and just was like erasing every single memory. We used to say this way back when, because I couldn't remember anything because I had so much deep hurt that my subconscious protected me from remembering that deep hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that as I really allowed myself to express grief in the moment, express hurt in the moment, feel angry when anger came up, that started to unlock older memories. That started to unlock knowing that I didn't need the protection mechanism of not remembering anymore. So I was able to really heal and address things I couldn't remember by harnessing the power of the present moment with the tools that I had.
Mm.
And I find that I've heard many different things like, oh, if you don't remember, that's really bad. And like something really, really bad must have happened to you. But then I've also heard that you will unlock what you are supposed to when you have the tools and capacity to process it. And that has been such an empowering way of navigating for me, because I realized that I'm not supposed to heal every single thing in like sessions every single day where I'm just healing my subconscious. I'm not supposed to heal all of it at once, because that would be extremely overwhelming and I would have no time to live as a human in this world with all the beauty and all the contrast. So I just realized that there's so much to letting things unfold in a natural way rather than forcing yourself to heal specific things.
I love that. I want to circle back to the like it's experiential. You're the second person that I have been talking to recently that has this approach as well, that it's through experience that you really get to heal and learn things about yourself. And I agree with you. I think, if you try to do it all at once, it's going to be too much. Your system's going to be like, whoa, and then it's going to go back into that shutdown place. I think it's like everything you go through helps you build the capacity to then approach the stuff that was too painful back then because you didn't have the skill set or the understanding of what was happening. And I think, yeah, the blocks in memory could be these big things that also it's not always what happens, it's more what happens inside of you.
Yeah.
And I've learned that more and more through this work, that it's not necessarily the big stuff, but almost that small stuff that tends to be a little bit more insidious and sneakier.
1,000%. So I have a therapist and I do EMDR therapy. And a lot of the times what we're doing is processing old things. So I have a space to, of course, process the old things. But I realized that a lot of like the deep rooted beliefs come from the most like menial of moments in my childhood. And it's like, yeah, I can root back to, the passing of my father and many different big situations, but we're going through our session and I'm like, this is like the tiniest little instance that's coming forward. And I can feel like this thread being pulled and everything unraveling in a really powerful way from like the smallest of things. Like I cried once and no one came and, it was over very quickly, but that created a story. It created this subconscious belief within me. And it's just so interesting to like see how that unfolds.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. I love this conversation. So let's talk about how subconscious beliefs, childhood trauma, and grief can impact you as an adult. And then we'll talk about, I want to obviously talk about, because we all love the tangible stuff, but I just, I want to break this down like of like where, you kind of touched on it, of the stories of the past create the subconscious beliefs, but where it all comes from.
Yeah. So I can go on forever about this. But where it all comes from is that from the ages around 0 to 7, we can frame that to age 8 or a little even beyond that. We are sponges. We're walking around in a brainwave state that takes everything as truth. So we don't have the capacity to understand that something that happens isn't based on us. We relate everything to ourselves. So when things happen, so for me in my experience, when my dad passed away, I had formed a belief that this was my fault. Everyone leaves me. And I also didn't have the tools to be able to navigate grief. I think most adults don't even have the tools to navigate grief. And I also observed the adults around me not navigating their own grief. So then I learned to not navigate my own grief. So there's such a ripple effect. So when we're in this brainwave state that we are sponges, everything relates to us, and everything that happens forms a continuous thought pattern, which becomes a belief that roots from whatever happened. So I'm being adopted, even at that moment of birth and being separated from my birth mother, a belief was formed that I'm abandoned. And then I lost my dad very young, and that belief was further proven true and further instilled in me that I am abandoned. And then I had many experiences in my life that prove that belief true. And I looked for evidence subconsciously, I wasn't aware, but I kept looking for evidence to prove it true. And then I spent so much of my early adult life still looking for that evidence and putting myself in situations where I could be proven right over and over and over again. So it was, we put ourselves in situations and experiences to prove ourselves right or prove ourselves wrong. But these beliefs are so ingrained that we attract the situations continuously. And then we see the same person show up in different people. We see the same situation show up in different experiences. And then that belief system just becomes further cemented. So the power of the work that we do is that we can really understand that the belief that formed so long ago actually wasn't truth. And everything that I felt from it was very valid. However, it didn't mean that there was anything wrong with me. It didn't mean that I'm broken. That's a really big one. The I am broken theme was such a big one in my life. And I thought I was broken. So I attracted so many different situations in my life that proved that true. And then I decided, you know what? I can't choose that anymore. I literally became so desperate that I was like, I cannot keep operating in this way, that I got to choose a different belief. And I've figured that out before I knew any of these terminologies. And then I kept looking for evidence to help me create that reality. So it's just, there's such a impact that those situations have when we're so young that really will impact us our entire lives if we're not choosing to heal.
So good. So it's like I'm been doing this work as well, just like on a personal level, and then incorporating it more and more with my clients because I've learned how to change beliefs, right? And it's not as easy as just choosing a new thought.
No.
It's like, people tell you, oh, just choose a new thought. And like you can, but you can't sustain it because as soon as you stop choosing that thought when it's convenient for you to choose it, it's just, it's not going to make the long-term sustainable shift. Maybe short-term, it'll feel better momentarily. It's almost like a Band-Aid approach of here's a new thought. That's nice. But then when you stop thinking it, it doesn't help you. It continues to perpetuate, I think that theme of there's something wrong with me tends to be very prevalent. I've also have had that belief come to the surface and be like, wow, like I feel like I approached this from a conscious level. I'm like, I thought I took care of this. And then it's like, actually, no, this is still super deeply embedded and rooted in me. And I'm seeing this like come up in all of these different areas of my life. And doing the deep work to reprogram it and doing the deep work to prove to myself that that's not true is not easy. So how do you approach it? How do you help clients and yourself overcome that? And how do you do the reprogramming?
Oh yeah, there's many different tools that I have. So there's so hypnosis, so bringing you into the suggestible state, into this brainwave state that we were in when we were younger as an adult, with a lot of intention. So I will lead people through hypnosis to help get into the subconscious mind, see what's going on in the subconscious mind, also validate whatever experiences they had from a place of knowing that there's nothing wrong with them, that the feelings that they had were valid, that they were now safe to feel the feelings. And then also it's safe to let go of the beliefs. And I feel that through my work, such a big part of it is creating that safety to accept yourself where you are, and also to choose a new way. Because I think that a lot of the times people are so afraid of change because it feels like it's not safe to change. So I can use the tools to help bring you back into a body knowing that it is safe. So I do that through hypnosis. I also do it through body work. So through breath work. I mean, there is so much power in many different types of breath work. I think breath work, there's so many different types, even just long, deep breathing to get you back into that parasympathetic nervous system, that rest and digest state, rather than the active sympathetic nervous system of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So even just long, deep breathing can be really, really impactful. But I also use the practice of conscious connected breath work, of kind of getting you into an uncomfortable body position when you're in a safe environment, to help you clear out things that are in the body that have been there for a very long time. So in conscious connected breath work, you kind of invoke a state of it. I mean, sometimes I'm like, it feels like stress to your body, to help remind you in a stressful state, you are still safe and held. And there's so much power that comes from the practice of conscious connected breath work. And there's also many different layers of it. So you're clearing energy from your system, you're clearing out old emotions. It's so common to cry or want to scream and scream in these things, because there's emotions that are stored in the body that haven't been expressed because we didn't have the tools to express them, or we weren't safe to express them at the time that it happened. And then also there's a spiritual element of breath work. So we can get spiritual messages, connect more to our intuition. And I just find that using the power of conscious connected breath work has been such a holistic way to work with a lot of the subconscious beliefs. And then we can also, use it with intention. So say there's something coming up really frequently for you that you want to clear, we can go into that practice with the intention of, I want to see what comes up here and help myself clear it. So that's one way that I like to use breath work in my work. I also incorporate somatics through Kundalini yoga. So doing different Kriya practices that are really connected to different energy meridians in the body that can help you release. It can help you invoke states that you're looking to invoke, like joy, and release suffering. And there's just so many ways that we can do that. And I can go on and on and on with many different things.
Well, and I love this because I think, it all works. And I think it just depends on the person and where they're at, like meeting them where they're at. I also am a breathwork facilitator, and I find, like in a safe setting, like adding stress to the system is, I think, one of the most effective ways to release, so then you can access those parts of yourself and access your intuition and inner wisdom. I led a group last night, and I always leave just mind blown. Like the insights and the downloads and the inner wisdom on I just have to hold the space and make sure they feel safe. And then like what happens, and always like guide the breath, but like what happens during it and the connections they make is so unique to each person. And it's just such a beautiful process. And so hearing you say that just further confirms and affirms how important specifically breath work is to doing this work. Because it does, I have noticed in my own practice that it does get you out of that, your beta brain, and gets you more into that suggestible state. And that is really where the work happens. Like it's on that, like that deeper level in your mind. So I'm curious then, like for, how you approach it with someone that's more resistant to doing this, that like doesn't, they're more resistant to the breath work or even like the Kundalini, and they're not familiar with Kriya or energy work or meridians. Like, how do you approach it with someone that's skeptical?
Yeah, I mean, I always think that the proof is in the pudding. So if someone can be skeptical, but I really have had a lot of privilege of working with people who are very open. But with working with skeptical, I have a bunch of different tools that we will get into, not a full hypnosis, but, we'll deep breathe, which most people, you breathe every single day. So even just taking a few deep breaths in and out,
Like life-changing.
life-changing. And I find that many people are open to it.
Mhm.
I haven't had anyone resistant to just taking a few deep breaths in and out. And then I'll work with the conscious mind at
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
to create that sense of safety. I mean, I think that I know that one of the biggest ways to create that sense of safety is through rapport and
Mhm.
through just being open to listen to someone. So working with the human and realizing like it makes sense, maybe they have some resistance and that's okay, and just allowing them to know that they're in a safe space has created a lot of openness in people that were otherwise closed. So even
Mm.
just building that rapport and just connecting. I mean, I don't even like using the words building rapport, but it's just like caring and connecting is so much more transformational than we give credit for. I
Mhm.
think in this work, there's always, I am someone who I love learning different tools. I love really connecting. I love to see what works for one person and what works for another person. But what I've found is the biggest way to really change someone's life is be there and listen and be open. And there's
Mm.
so many tools out there, but
Mm.
really just having someone that creates a safe space is the biggest tool.
Ugh, yes. And I think that's, could not agree more and everything. And I think that's honestly where I learned, being trauma informed is really being nervous system informed, and
Mm,
how safety is the foundation for all of this work
yeah.
and helping people create that safety. You said something earlier about like creating safety where so people can accept themselves like where they're at.
Mm,
I want you to speak to that a little bit because that's like in my own journey right now. That came up for me recently in a breathwork session of me being coached and, doing some of this deeper work and just being kind of like surprised at the areas where I haven't been accepting myself and getting curious about that because I'm like all the work I've been doing is about accepting, but like there's some sort of disconnect which shows me that there's a unconscious belief blocking that.
yeah. Self-acceptance is not taught.
Mm-mm.
We live in a society where you are taught to do better than everyone else, and then you're rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
That there's ways that you can be good and ways you can be bad. We don't have, I mean, we didn't grow up with a lot of conscious parenting, which is not to blame the parents, it's just the society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much geared towards you have to keep moving and excelling and doing better and better and better and better.
Mm-hmm.
And we lost the ability to understand that the way that we expand is actually through accepting ourselves where we are. I, my entire life, I was running from myself. I had absolutely no self-acceptance. I didn't even know what that was, no,
Mm-hmm.
like in any way, shape, or form. And I really didn't feel like it's really going back to that safety piece, that it was safe to accept myself. Because if I accepted myself, I thought that I wouldn't be good enough for the people in my life. And if I wasn't good enough for the people in my life, then they would leave me. So I mean, really rooting back into the abandonment wound. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I really did not even comprehend any level of self-acceptance. And now I know that that is the biggest piece towards anything that I do in the world, that showing up in a way that is just honoring what you've been through and who you are in this moment is the catalyst to everything that you are calling in a way that's really aligned. Because if you are operating from a place that you gotta keep being better, doing more, having more, something out there is going to get you what you want rather than being good with yourself in the moment, you are never going to be able to, number one, appreciate what you have when you have it, or number two, allow yourself to really be present enough to enjoy life. And I find that self-acceptance is so huge, but most of us are unaccepting of something in our current reality. I think to say that we're going to have 100% self-acceptance and the healing journey is kind of trying to be a perfectionist about healing, which I think is very common.
Guilty.
Yeah,
and it's so sneaky.
It is the sneakiest, because that's literally what we're talking about. It's like the perfectionism about the healing journey is the direct opposite of self-acceptance.
Totally.
Like,
yeah. It's so insidious. It's
it is
crazy how sneaky that perfectionism is.
I
Of
know.
like, oh, like I need to be doing more. I need to be learning the next thing. I need to be fixing this. I need to work on this. And it can like be, you know, you can paint it in a way or present it in a way that is not perfectionist at all. But what's driving it is clearly perfectionism.
I know. Yeah. That's one, I think that's a life journey for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, as you said before, you know, there's parts of our healing journey where we're like, oh, I thought I healed this.
The amount of times I've had that thought, I'm like, wait a second. I thought I fixed this. I thought this wouldn't be a problem anymore.
Yeah. And I love that, because I think that there's two sides to it. So like, yes, we could have been processing it from the conscious level where we didn't really get deep into the root, or we could have been processing it from an unconscious and subconscious level, but there's another layer. So I like to remember that kind of perfectionism comes up again. It's like, oh, I thought I healed this, but it's like, actually, you know what? You did heal this in many ways. And also there's other layers to it. But which is self-acceptance in itself, I think.
Totally. Yeah. And you can see it's like how it's all connected.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it is like I've had that thought multiple times. And I feel like having my daughter really like it's like, oh my God, like I'm not good in all the stuff. It's like just comes out. And so I did, like, to your point, and that's the work I've been doing, is recognizing like I did heal it in this capacity at this level, but now I'm like I have the capacity to go to the deeper levels that I didn't feel safe to go to before. And it is kind of like this weird moment where you're just like, I don't know if it's like I'm ready, but it's like this inner knowing, or at least this was my experience, because I was seeing how things were playing out in my life postpartum, and all these things were coming up for me. And I was like, well, this is interesting. And it almost just felt like an invitation of like, it's time. Like, it was like taking my hand and being like, we can go there now because you have the skill set. You didn't have this skill set then. You don't have the skill set a year ago. You have the skill set now. So let's go. And that's kind of where it's been at for me. And it's been so beautiful and transformative and painful and all of the things. Like, it's been highs and lows. But I'm so grateful for it because it really has allowed me to get to know myself better than I ever have. And that's where the self-acceptance is. Cause I'm like side looking at these parts of myself that I've just been ignoring. And now I'm like inviting them all in. And I'm like, let's chat, let's sit down and have this conversation. So yeah, what you said just so deeply resonates with me on so many levels.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how when you're, you tie in the nervous system, right? Tying in nervous system regulation, what is the connection between the subconscious and the nervous system?
I love this question. So this is really, really related to something I just wrote about a few days ago. So I'm like, okay. But the body and mind have specific memories within them. So when we are accessing a situation in our life that reminds us of a past situation. So say, we're having an argument with someone and it reminds us of hearing your parents argue or something like that. Our subconscious belief that I did something wrong, they're mad at me, like whatever subconscious belief comes to the surface triggers a response of the nervous system
Mhm.
that tells us we are unsafe in the moment. So there's so many different situations that we walk through life where we're having invitations and opportunities present themselves for healing, but our body and mind are remembering a past event or situation, or a belief system that is so ingrained comes up that our nervous system is activated and tells us, oh, it's not safe.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So this is why you can't outthink it.
No.
Because it's like it's signaling something within your body, and then that your body is communicating, and it's a one way, right? It's not like going back and forth. It's like signaling there's safety, there's danger, perceived threat. You're not safe, even if consciously you are, subconsciously they're not in alignment, and so that causes that disconnect.
Completely. And I love that you just use the word perceived threat, because the mind doesn't know the difference between real or perceived.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're getting an angry email from someone from work, our body goes into a reaction sometimes like, oh my God, I'm in physical danger.
Yeah.
And we can consciously say, like, you're fine. You're like looking at a screen, reading something on the screen, everything's okay. But your body cannot tell the difference because your mind has sent a signal, we are unsafe, and your body responds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's the next step from there? So it's like you get an angry email, and now you're signaling danger, and now your body's going into this response.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, I think, tend to just push through, or they fire off a reactive email and then end up ruminating, regretting it, and like beating themselves up about it later on.
Mm-hmm.
Or other people just go into shutdown, which again, these
Yeah.
are all, your nervous system responding. But what do you do from that point when you do get triggered and, a subconscious belief has been activated within you?
Yes. Pause. Oh my God. Take a
Yeah.
sacred
The
pause.
power of the
The
pause.
power of the pause. I mean, truly, we have been taught to keep moving and going and respond immediately to everything, especially in the world that we live in with our phones, instant response, that we have to remember the power of a sacred pause, power of just taking a beat. And a lot of the times people are like, well, I'm in an office and that's not really available. Like, I will say, yes, it is available. You can get up and go to the bathroom and hide in the stall for a second if that's the only way that you can get some space. But really, if you're in a situation where there's a trigger happening, take a pause, put your hands on your body, heart, sacral, solar plexus, wherever on your belly, and let yourself take really deep breaths in through the nose. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the nose or the mouth, elongating that exhale a little bit to signal to the mind and body that you are in a safe situation. Because really taking those long, deep breaths with that exhale extended helps get you into that parasympathetic nervous system, which can change so much, because then you can think clearer for a response that is warranted. You can also just remind your body, like, there's no threat here. So you use the power of the body to signal that you are safe. And then also, this one I think is so big, but in, the animal kingdom, when an animal is no longer in a threat, they shake their body, shaking off the excess stress to signal that they are safe. So when you are activated by something that happens, usually, like you said, you just kind of keep going, and then you never get that signal that you're safe. So taking some moments to shake out your body is also life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so much parallel with what we do. I just
Mm.
love it. I love having these conversations because it just further, I love hearing some like the way that you talk about it, and then it just further um, solidifies an evidence for my beliefs that are they're changing and evolving as I do more of this deeper work. And it's truly through your own experience. Like you can teach this, but it's really hard to teach it unless you do it yourself. Like it's you could teach it, but it's like through your own transformation that you can really speak to it and understand it on such a deep level.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, I do want to talk about channeling because this is something that you do have as one of your modalities. And I think there's some misconceptions about it. And I want to clear up those misconceptions. And then I also want to talk into or speak to how to tap into that for yourself
Mhm.
because we are all intuitive beings.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about channeling. First of all, what's channeling? And what are some common misconceptions?
Okay, so channeling is being the receiver of messages from something or from energy that is both outside of you but deeply connected to you. I believe that in this energy realm, nothing is separate. So when we channel messages, we're tapping into this undercurrent of energy that everyone is connected to. Um, for me, my experience with channeling is I will hear certain messages, I will see certain things, I will know certain things, I will feel certain things, and that's the way that the channeling comes up for me. Um, and I feel that there's probably a lot of misconceptions around channeling. But I would say the biggest one, and I think this is going back to our whole conversation, is that it's unsafe and that it's something that only a few can do. Um, I have spoken to so many people who are in the spiritual space, who are in, the wellness space that are afraid to channel because they're afraid that number one, they're going to channel something that's bad. Um, they're also afraid that if they open up their portal for channeling, that then they're going to be walking in the world and getting messages left and right that they can't even like focus. And they're very afraid to open up this channel to beautiful messages and guides and so many different energies that can just really help you on your journey. They're afraid because um they don't want to be unsafe. Really what it comes down to. And then the misconception that not everyone has this gift. I just don't believe that in any way, shape, or form. I think that everyone has channeled in their own way
Mm-hmm.
through their whole lives. I think that everyone is a channeler. I think that the power of your intuition is so strong. Yes, there are ways that we can build the channel. We can build our intuition. We can build our connection with our guides, loved ones, masters, teachers. We can build that. And there is some skill in it that you can completely access yourself. But I do know that it is available to everyone in some capacity.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So then, of course, the next question is how?
Mm. Okay, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story of
Okay.
when my channeling gifts really started to open up. So prior to this was in, I think, 2020 or early 2021, I'm not sure. Prior to that, I had been on the spiritual journey for almost a decade. So I had connected with my own intuition. I had connected with certain messages from guides that I just, would receive information and I knew that it was from something beyond me. So I think that a lot of us in this space can understand what that experience is like. But really what channeling was prior to this experience in 2021 was me creating some space and doing automatic writing in a journal. So I definitely recommend getting out a journal, saying, I am open to receive messages of love and light, and then just write in a journal, paper, wherever it is, handwrite. And sometimes that can just be like, I don't know what to write right now. I want to channel messages, but I don't know. And then just keep going and let yourself see what comes through. Because I promise you, if you show up for this and you create space for it, you are going to receive messages. So that's a recommendation. And that was really what my experience with channeling was. Also, I think having conversations with people, we all channel messages in really powerful ways. So I channeled when I was in conversation with people, but I never channeled in a way that I would consider like having a space where I downloaded information and was speaking exactly what was given to me out loud. I didn't really have that. So in early 2021, I had really committed to meditation. So this is another tool. I committed to having at least 10 to 20 minutes a day of silent meditation first thing in the morning. So I just really wanted to connect to myself. I just knew the power of meditation. I've been meditating for many years, and I just wanted to have a consistent practice and see what would unfold from it. So this was over 100 days into that intentional, choice I made. And I was in the woods. So this is another recommendation. Get outside, get in nature, go into the woods, lose yourself in the trees.
I'm here for all of
it. And I heard the message, open your mouth and speak. So I was like, okay. So I opened and I started to receive some of the most beautiful messages that I will never forget. And they were all about what I'm here to do in the world, how I'm here to trust this pull, this nudge in the direction that I want to be going in. And it was a very long conversation that I started to have with a collective energy group that presented themselves to me as the guardians of light. So I've learned that they're a collective group of souls that like to connect light workers on the earth. So anyway, I received messages from them, and then they had shared that I am meant to find an Akashic Records teacher. So within 48 hours, even though I didn't know anyone who did Akashic Records really, I found an Akashic Records teacher and learned how to read the Akashic Records, which is the way that I choose to channel now. But I had really just got into a place where I was really comfortable with getting silent, really open to connecting to the infinite connection that we have between us. And when I was open and not even looking, my channeling gifts unlocked. I was able to, for the first time ever, have like clairaudience, claircognizance, clairvoyance, and clairsentience all blow open, which has been a very interesting journey to navigate for sure.
Wow. So, the common theme is stillness, quiet, pause. Yeah. And I think, everybody does have access to it. Yes. So, you mentioned like the different types of channeling and clairvoyance. Will you touch on that? I've had people on my show before that have broke it down, but just in case someone's listening and they don't know what that means, how would you explain it to them?
Yeah, so I can explain from my own experience. I haven't like Googled a bunch of them, but so clairvoyance is where you see images. So when I'm in a Akashic Record session with clients, I will actually see images presented in front of me. Sometimes they're in my mind. Sometimes they're like physically looking in front of me, where I'll see different images and be able to describe what images are coming. Then we have clairaudience, which is where you can actually hear messages coming that can sound like an outside voice or an inside voice. I really was able to recognize my clairaudience even better when I knew what my internal voice sounded like. So when I knew what the voice I constantly have going on sounded like, I was able to decipher the difference between what my voice was and what a channeling clairaudience message was. So I think that that's another tool of just like getting really clear with like, what does your internal voice sound like? Clairsentience is the ability to feel things in your body. So for example, when I'm in a client session, I can actually feel their heart beating very, very fast if there's a nervous energy. I can also feel if there's a situation coming up, maybe from a past life or something, and they're in water, I can like feel like I'm actually in water. And there's just a really interesting thing that comes over. And claircognizance is just an internal knowing that's unshakable, I would say. So a knowing that comes, you don't know how you know, but you know. And those are the way that my gifts present themselves in different times for different people. It's really interesting to see the way that they come through and the different ways they sound and the different visuals that come forward and the different ways they feel. And it's really been such a beautiful thing that I love having the gift. And I also love teaching people that they have access to elements of these gifts as well.
I love that so much. I think even just as you're speaking to it, I can think of like different instances where like the knowing, just the deep knowing without having any other context, hearing things. I remember like in a deep meditation I had one time, it was this like very clear voice that was not my own, that was like, it's not about you. And it was so like, it was so like I could feel it. I can remember it. I can remember the voice. It was not mine at all. And it was in a very deep meditation. I was doing transcendental meditation at the time. And that voice was very much like, this is no longer about you. And it was really like what helped me step into my path of like helping serve others. And it's like, when you hear those things, you can't ignore them. Like they're there, or it shows up in ways, it manifests in ways when you ignore them in undesirable ways, because it's trying to like get your attention.
Literally.
So if someone, I think I know the answer to this, but I'm curious if someone is curious about channeling, or they like have kind of had experience with it, but are a little resistant, where would you say the best place to start is?
I'm going to circle back, but creating safety in the nervous system of just knowing that you're safe and 1,000% getting quiet consistently, 10 to 20 minutes a day, silent meditation. I mean, I love a good guided meditation and visualization, but silent meditation is really where you get to hear what you can't hear. And so I just love recommending silent meditation if you're really looking to strengthen the channeling gifts that you have already. And then also like getting to a place that you feel a deep connection. So for me, that's nature and in the trees, but allowing yourself to really find a place that helps you connect to the oneness that is the core of everything on this earth. I think being in that place is kind of a guarantee that you're going to get some message because you're tapping into the wisdom of everything. So I would just, start there.
Yeah. All right. I love it. I mean, there's such a common thread in like safety and connection, stillness, and it's stuff that everybody has access to. And I think that it's such a good starting point. Like you don't have to hire a coach. To do this deep work, of course, like 10 out of 10 recommend hiring a coach to hold the space and help you feel safe and create that within. But you don't need that to start. You just need to give yourself that intentionality to create the space for yourself. And then you kind of see where it takes you from there. I think to your point with the Akashic Records, like you first of all probably didn't even know much about it. Like you got this download. It was like, okay, I don't even know anybody that does it, but like it came to you at the time that it needed to come to you. And I think like that's where you start. And I've had clients like in many times be like, all of a sudden your name popped into my mind. Like I was doing this thing and your name popped in and I knew I had to reach out to you. Like that's not a coincidence. Like there was something to that because it was the timing was exactly how it was supposed to be to work together. So I think like this is such a good tangible place to start. And it's not about doing more, it's about being more. Oh, this was so great, Erin. I just love chatting with you. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Is there anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I just want to like everyone who's listening to like really trust themselves. Like trust that the messages you get are real. Trust that you're on the right path. Trust that if you're listening to this, you're doing something right. I really feel that if you're led here, there's a huge reason. So if anything within this really connected with you, follow it. Trust that. Like it's going to lead you somewhere really, really beautiful.
Oh, I love it so much. So good. All right. So if I asked your friends and family what your superpower is, what would they say?
I actually did this practice with my friends and family like a few years ago, and I'm like, I kind of want to ask them again. So
Yeah,
that's
I know. I remember that's how my podcast name came, because I did this practice a long time ago, and I asked people what my superpower was, and they said, oh, it was like positivity across the board. I was like, that's a superpower. Like I didn't
oh,
even register to me. Like that could be a superpower. So I'm curious what yours are. So what did they say when you asked them?
I like can't remember, which is why I really want to go back and look. But I would say my superpower is actually like acceptance. Accepting people where they are, like we're talking about. And that only came from when I was able to accept myself where I was. But acceptance and showing up really in a non-judgmental way, because I think I have this ability to understand and have compassion for what other people are going through. So if someone comes to me with the wildest of things, I'm going to be able to have a lot of compassion for them.
I love that. That is a beautiful superpower.
Mm.
It's so good. Well, thank you so much for your time. Where can people find you? Do you have anything going on right now that people might be interested in? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Erin Panzarella. That's where I'm most active. I also have a Facebook community where we do free Akashic Records readings each week. So I go live and they can come and just participate and receive a free Akashic message. So I have that community available. So if you find me on Instagram, you can message me and I will send you the details there. I also have a free human design energy blueprint where if you go to my website, erinpanzarella.com, you can get a free 13-page energy report based on your human design sent straight to you, and also an Akashic Records meditation there. And I really like people to get a feel for me and my work first before they decide to invest. Like you said, I did most of this work by myself, and I 10 million out of 10 recommend working with someone else, because I know that it can feel really lonely. But I do love people to like see if they resonate with my energy. So you can find me there, see if you resonate, and then we can connect more.
Oh, I love it. I'll make sure all of that's in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time. This was such an amazing conversation. And I know that there's so much value, juicy nuggets that came from it. So even if someone listening just takes one step today, they can start their own journey. So good. Thanks again.